Good morning. Good
Morning.
morning, committee. Good morning, Treasurer Pichek. Good to have you here. We have been working hard on H66 and your office is a big part of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the bill, which we are planning on amending in quite a few ways related to the dollars. And part of that is your thoughts on the dollars. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you very much for having me in and letting me sort of talk a little bit about what we've been doing too in terms of due diligence to look at this bill and to think a little bit about, what it would mean for the Treasurer's Office to undertake establishing the paid family leave program, both in our due diligence prior to talking to other states. And then at this point, we've contacted with 3 states in sort of a more in-depth way. One of them is not a state, but the District of Columbia, Colorado, and the last state was Massachusetts. And we have a couple of more that we'd like to connect with, Oregon and Washington in particular. But even before connecting with them, it appeared that, the paid family leave programs that have been established, at least more recently since DC, have either been independent sort of authorities or they are within a larger agency that really those divisions are self-sufficient. So not dependent on some sort of expertise from within, revenue department or within the Department of Labor. So it's given us more comfort that it really can be a standalone entity or agency. We've testified to this in House General, but it's even more, feels even more certain after having those conversations with the individual states about how they've set up and administered their paid leave program. So in talking with those 3 states, in terms of implementation and timeline, I think, certainly there's sufficient time built into the current draft to establish, the revenue piece will be the Department of Tax. You'll have to talk to them. I don't want to speak to them about the revenue, but it seems like there'd be sufficient period of time to think about establishing the revenue and the opt-out provision by year 2, and then setting up the benefits IT and having the benefits ready to go 15 months after that. And then also having the hiring take place during that time period, really focused on significant hiring toward the last year before the benefits program is administered. So if you think about it in terms of year 1, year 2, and then year 3, sort of encompassing that entire 15-month period following revenue collection. In year 1, we'd have pretty minimal expenses. There wouldn't really be any expense for IT startup costs yet. I think under the current timeline, it would make the most sense to certainly do the RFP and think about who vendors could be, but wait to do a contract in year 2. But you would want to hire certain, I think, key personnel, a director of paid family leave, a product manager that would eventually sort of manage that IT project, an attorney that would be focused on rulemaking and the like. And then from what we've been hearing from other states, somebody that is basically either a community liaison or a business liaison, somebody that is an outreach person, both to inform businesses about, how things are progressing in terms of the startup and the establishment of the program, and also employees too, so that people are aware of what is a benefit and is not a benefit and what they're entitled to and what they're not entitled to try to minimize confusion, as the program gets ramped up and launched. So those, maybe 4 key positions are, we estimate, $500,000, $600,000, dollars in terms of payroll costs that first year. And then the other expense in that first year, we obviously wouldn't have either, is ongoing IT costs, which wouldn't kick in until the program is established. So that second year, that's when you would really want to figure out who your IT vendor is for the benefits side. We heard from Colorado, they have entered into a contract with Deloitte to manage their benefits IT program. So Deloitte is really a household name in consulting. We understand that Deloitte has at least done 1, if not 2 other states in terms of establishing their benefits program on the paid family leave side. Colorado entered into a fixed contract with them. So it was, fixed price, certain milestones along the way. I think they had 4 milestones built into their contract with, a piece of the contract being awarded once each milestone was reached. So their contract in total was about $22 million. It was signed, 2 or 3 years ago. So we have just an estimate of $30 million to be safe and to take into account, potential inflation. It could be less than that, but because of because there are these milestones, that means that year two, you'd probably estimate $15 million in IT startup costs, half the contract being established. On the personnel side, I think you'd also want to hire maybe 2 or 3 other key people as you're building toward the revenue launch date. Because on the revenue launch date, when people start to pay into the system, the businesses start to pay into the system, you're also going to want to make sure that that opt-out provision is established so that businesses have their own private plan that they can opt out. So they're not paying the revenue with the intention of never participating in the program. I think businesses are going to want to make sure that that is established and ready to go at the beginning of that second year. So that's what that additional personnel would be in that second year. So maybe there's an estimate on payroll costs of another, $200,000 or $300,000 to bring it up to $1 million that second year. And then that third year, which is really that 15-month period, once the revenue starts being collected, that's really when you're fully ramping up. You have, the other half of the IT contract coming to fruition. So maybe, again, $15 million or whatever that contract number is. And then you're ramping up the full hiring of people that are going to administer the claims, people that are going to consider, reconsideration of the claims if they're denied, people that will work with businesses to make sure they're in compliance, people that will protect against fraud. So that whole complement of positions that you'll need to establish a program like this. And that full payroll estimate that we have is about $7 million when we run through all the positions that we think we will need. It's pretty close to what I believe JFO did on their own estimate, which was about $6 million. And I think we landed at about the same number of positions, about 45 to 50 positions sort of needed to operate the program. And that is consistent with the other jurisdictions that we have talked to. If you scale down for how many employees they have in their jurisdiction and how many we have in ours, that the number, the head count on employees kind of, sort of is similar in that way on a proportional basis. So that gave us comfort as well. And then the only other thing you'll have to add to the financial mix is sort of when it's fully launched. So think of it as year 4, when revenue has run, when the 15-month period and benefits have started to flow. That $7 million would be, in perpetuity and obviously growing as as COLA and other things sort of grow. But then you'll have maybe $2 or $3 or $4 million of ongoing IT costs. And that's a real estimate at this point. We don't have a good sense of what other states are spending on ongoing IT costs. But that's another important consideration to make sure that the system is running well and you're getting the kind of, responsiveness that you need to make sure it works for everyone that has to interface with the program. So that's the broadest sort of overview of what we think it would take to both sort of set it up on a timeline and then what that timeline would cost in terms of year 1 through year 4.
Representative Maslin and then Brannigan.
Yeah. Morning, Mike.
Morning.
We've had, I guess we could say, 3 different witnesses talk about ID costs.
Yeah.
We had Commissioner Bolio talking about IT costs from his perspective of what it would take for his outfit. You're telling us something new, and we heard from JFO on what I guess was overall IT costs. They didn't break it down, but it was a very different number. And so at some point, we'll need to make a chart for ourselves.
Yeah, fair.
And see how these all add up. And I'm not, I'm guessing that each of the parties was saying it like it is from their perspective of their shop. And but there's a considerable amount of money when you add it all up, as you recognize. And so we'll have to sort that out. And at some point, we may have assistance with columns, Treasury's cost, JFO's perspective, and Commissioner Bolio's cost. And we'll just have to work through it. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that, I mean, when we spoke with Colorado, I guess is probably the best example because they're in the sort of middle of establishing the program, and their IT numbers would be the most sort of consistent with what's happening in the marketplace. What I was, you can think of it as revenue or what they call premium. So basically revenue premium side and then the benefit side. So what I was speaking to is just the benefit side. They entered into a revenue. So in Colorado, they did everything. They did revenue collection and benefits. So they didn't rely on their tax department or revenue department.
Okay.
And they entered into a separate $20 million contract just for the revenue collection. So that, I think, probably is, why you're hearing Commissioner Bolio say that he needs money for IT costs, and then probably why you're hearing JFO have a bigger number, because they're looking at both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just wouldn't want to be on the floor relying on one party's number and finding out that there's a big challenge to that.
I know JFO is finishing up their fiscal note, and there will be multiple columns for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, along with a multi-year timeline that sort of separates out the startup time and startup costs, which would be appropriations, from the ongoing costs, which would be built into the revenue model. Representative Brannigan.
Thank you. So we would need people who are smart, know how to work, and who can step back and see the big picture of what we're trying to do here and get it before it's even created. And we need, 47 of them?
But
Did you say 47 new people?
I think for people that would fit that, not that everybody that worked on the program wouldn't have all those skill sets, but the people that would be most important to sort of take it from vision to implementation would be those people in that first year, the director, a product manager, an attorney, and then someone that does sort of outreach for communities. That'd be those 4 people.
Are there people out there you can hire?
Those 4 people, I'd be pretty confident that we could find. I mean,
Do you have them already?
no, but
In other positions that you would?
we have some, I guess maybe the DFR commissioner would not want to hear me say this on the record. So everyone's saying, no, I'm just joking. But that's where I worked previously. So we know how talented their team is. No, but I think they're, for those 4 positions, we were talking about this internally, that part doesn't give me too much pause for concern. Then you're talking 2 years into the future about what the what the sort of the workforce situation looks like. And that's when you really have to ramp up.
You need people
Yeah.
who understand what it is we're trying to do, and they can catch mistakes on the way through. Was that mine?
No, that's me, sorry.
Yeah, particularly once you
You
implement.
can hire that many.
Well, in the short term, we're confident in terms of the leadership positions. And, certainly if you're trying to hire, any business is even trying to hire, a half a dozen or a dozen, it's not, you can't say there's no concern. We'll have to see what the market looks like in 2 years. And, some states have relied heavily on their vendor as they've been trying to ramp up because they haven't been able to fill positions. So I think there are backstops you can do, but hopefully we've built enough housing in 2 years that we have put a little bit of relief on our workforce shortage issues.
I think it's hard all the
Yeah.
way around.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
My husband's business, he runs a CPA firm, and he can't hire any young people who want to come in to northern Vermont and do that work.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt the larger upscale, I think, will be a challenge in terms of making sure you get the right workforce. I am confident in the short term in terms of those leadership positions that we'd be able to identify people.
Okay.
But I think you're certainly well placed in terms of the concern that you have on that larger upscale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we talking about hiring a third-party company to actually write the software or doing it in-house?
So Deloitte would do the product development.
Okay.
Well, I say Deloitte, but whoever the vendor would be.
Right.
It's just that they seem to have made a mark for themselves in this space, and they're.
I imagine you would do an open bidding.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to, yeah.
But it seems hard, seems to me that with the kind of programming that's done nowadays, that a lot of it should be portable from one system to another. I mean, I know the states differ, and I've heard, and that's absolutely true, the systems would differ, but there's always underlying pieces of software that would make it easier for the same company to do it again. So
I would hope so.
I'm wondering whether that's getting factored into the costs at all, or whether, how that's being factored into the cost.
Yeah. It's a little bit tough because you do have to do the RFP process. So you have to sort of wait and see who bids, and hopefully Deloitte would bid, and hopefully, even if the price were the same as Colorado, hopefully they've now, been through this whole process, that there'll be less delays or less, unexpected turns, and the process will be smoother. So I think you at least get that benefit. So it's, it could be part of the negotiation around how much work they would actually have to do for our state that's new relative to what they did for previous state. But I think that's partly why they got into this space, is that they maybe saw an opportunity to replicate what they've done in other states. So I think it'd be part of the contract price negotiation.
Yeah, of course, it's always difficult as the company as that company to say, well, we're going to make up for some of the loss we suffered in Colorado.
Right.
By doing it.
And there are most certainly other companies that have worked in other states that they've intended their work with that state. It appears to be a loss leader, that they would establish reputation and a platform, and then they would take that elsewhere and start to make money in other states. And I don't know if that's what Deloitte has done, but the other company that we heard from that had done that. They're not very happy with their product, and no other state has taken them up on it. So I think, a firm that is reputable, that will stand by its work product, and I think their tagline is Deloitte gets it done or something like that. But you want to make sure somebody that would stand behind their product and make sure that on launch date, everything is good to go is important.
And it's really important for this committee to figure out the ongoing costs the best we can in order to make sure that we're setting the tax rate right. And I want to make sure that we have the right numbers in the bill as we send it along. But appropriations will, of course, dig in deep to the one-time startup costs and sort of the IT piece of this.
Thank you. I worry about the ongoing ones as much as the upfront. And one of the things that struck me as a point that cannot be ignored from Joyce Manchester yesterday was the possibility of adverse selection amongst participants, because, of course, people can create an alternative plan or join the one that we eventually do. And the revenue base, the trust fund, is very sensitive to bailing out of high wage or high salary people who may not participate. So for me, worrying that we have a premium that can sustain the system but not drive people away who are very wealthy and can do it otherwise is truly daunting to thread that needle.
And I guess I would add to that, before you answer, if I could, that I think for a service like this, especially if a larger private company is making a decision, the customer service that is offered to the participants who would opt in might be equally important to the cost. And so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about sort of what values you would want to bring to benefit provision as you're carrying out this work on behalf of the state.
Yeah, for sure. Just like, I think it was Massachusetts that we had spoken with that addressed this particular issue. It may have been Colorado as well, but so during this sort of ramp up phase and the startup phase, when you opt out, you were not allowed to then come in, and basically just avoid the 15-month ramp up period. If you're a new business or had moved to Massachusetts, that's a different.
That's the kind of anticipation I have in mind.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that has to be addressed either by rule or, a statute. I'm not sure how it's addressed by statute at the moment in the legislation, but something that just to put in the back of our mind. In terms of, administration, I mean, obviously, like any program you establish, you want it to be as ready to go as, on the date, but not even just on the date. You really want it to be ready to go months before, so you can do all of the programming bugs and consumer services bugs and make sure everybody's well trained on the program. And certainly that outreach person will be key in making sure people understand what, is required and what is the benefit. And, you try to have it be as good of a consumer service experience as it possibly could be.
When we, as legislators, initiate a program or something, and the administration or the treasurer needs to take over or needs to implement it, they can drag their feet or they can be enthusiastic. Where are you on this? Is this something where you're saying,
Question.
Every work product I've always been enthusiastic about.
well, I mean, on the very highest level, philosophically, is this a program where you're saying, it'd be really nice if the state had paid family leave? Or are you thinking, I don't know, are you enthusiastic or what?
Yeah, well, I'm quite serious when I say, if we're tasked with doing this, we will enthusiastically establish it and make sure it's successful. And that, that is something, that's sort of a perspective on any work-related project that I would certainly bring to the table. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Representative Martin.
Yeah, to answer your question indirectly, but I hope to answer it. Mike was on BSC trustees for a while before the governor hired you away to do COVID stuff. I'm sorry we lost him. What I liked about working with the current treasurer on BSC is he thought about whatever was around the table, answered with good answers and good questions, and I found his participation to be remarkably straightforward and helpful. So that's my 10 cents.
Any other questions from anyone or anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, just, anything that we can do to be helpful in providing due diligence or research or more information to the committee or through the process, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks. And I think Saoirse might connect with you all about having some of the folks who are implementing in other states come in for.
Oh, great.
And then I know that JFO has appreciated the collaboration, getting to some final numbers with you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. And that's just, that's an iterative process to try to both figure out what's different or similar than the legislation here and what's different about the timing and unique about Vermont. So I think we'll get there. But I think that's partly why you're hearing this sort of, amalgamation of numbers to get to a final one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to go to the floor. And then we'll be back.